It wasn't long until the adults had came back from working. Gil got up and said, "I think I'm going to ask about dinner. I'm pretty hungry," Gil said. "Okay," Clementine said. She and Danielle got up and followed Gil, but she noticed that Sarah was still laying in her bed. Danielle continued to head downstairs. Meanwhile, Clementine watched Sarah as she looked up at the ceiling, which made Clementine worry. She knew that teen was in deep thought, since she wasn't reading a book, but she figured that she would let Sarah have some time to herself, just let her as her adoptive father had suggested. Clementine continued to head for the door and went downstairs. Once downstairs, she saw Luke heading for the stairs. "Hey kiddo, how was your day?" Luke asked. "It was good after having a rough start," Clementine said. Luke nodded and he said, "Is Sarah upstairs?" Clementine nodded and she said, "I think she's doing better. She had a short conversation with me, Danielle, and Gil." "Well, that's a progress," Luke said. "I was on patrol with Eddie today. He told me that the factory is where we'll have dinner every night. It's easier on everyone to gather around the factory for them than go from door to door with food." "Is Eddie still mad at Wyatt?" Clementine asked. She remembered how the two had gotten into a bad argument at dinner over Nate last night. "Nah, they made up. That's the thing with best friends. No matter how mad they get at each other, at the end of the day, they're still there for you," Luke said with a frown. "You seem sad," Clementine said. Luke sighed and he said, "Yeah, it's hard, Clem. I know Nick wasn't the nicest guy in the world to you, and it wasn't fair, but he was my best friend, and I miss him. It's not easy to find a friend that knows you inside out. It's something you develop over the course of your life." Clementine nodded. While she and Nick didn't always get along, he was still a part of the group, and the group was like a family. "Anyway, I thought you'd get ready for dinner to see if Sarah's willing to come." "Okay," Clementine said. "It was nice talking to you again, kiddo. It seems like we haven't done that for a while with all the craziness that's been going on," Luke said. He showed a small smile. "Yeah, you're right. Maybe you can help me with training again," Clementine said. "Kiddo, after what you've been through, the last thing you need is training. Focus on being a kid again and then we'll talk," Luke said. "Okay," Clementine said. Luke went past her and headed upstairs, but she stopped him by calling his name. "Luke, I'm sorry about hurting you." Luke turned to her and said, "It's all right, Clem. I know you didn't mean to do it," Luke said. Clementine nodded. She was thankful that Luke was willing to accept her apology. Luke continued going upstairs. Clementine turned around and saw Sarita gathering at the toys that she used to entertain Genevieve in the living room. Danielle was helping her. "Thanks for helping me, Danielle. I appreciate it," Sarita said. "You're welcome," Danielle said. "Do you need any help?" Clementine asked. "I think we got it," Danielle said. "But thanks, Clem. You seem to have calmed down too for earlier." She was going back to her cheerful young self. They went downstairs to the kitchen. However, Clementine noticed a rabbit plush toy on the couch. She figured it was Genevieve's, though it did appear to be worn. I'll get this one," Clementine said as she picked up the rabbit plush toy. Danielle turned around and said, "Hold on, Clem. That's mine. Her name is Flopsy." Clementine was suddenly surprised by this. Regardless of the trauma that Danielle experienced, she had still had some innocence left in her. "Sorry, I'll put her back on the couch," Clementine said. Danielle smiled and said, "Thanks, Clem." She went upstairs with Genevieve's toys in her arms. Clementine wondered if Danielle needed someone to talk to about her experience. She seemed like a nice girl, but she also seemed hurt and lonely at times. She knew that she felt better after talking to her mother, and Danielle did mention that what she went through would be something that she would only talk to an adult about it. Clementine knew that her mother was probably the best person to talk to, since she had comforted her. Sarah and Genevieve in the past. She would have to find her and ask her if she'd be willing to talk to Danielle. Clementine noticed Matthew walking over to the couch. "Clementine, what kind of mischief did you bring upon Rita today?" Matthew said. Clementine smiled. It seemed like he was returning to his normal self. She could slowly tell that he wasn't happy at what happened at the ski lodge when Walter was alive, but at least he was cracking jokes. "Nothing much. I played with Gil and Danielle for most of the day," Clementine said. I see. We'll have to change that. You gotta capitalize that situation. There are 3 of us and only 1 of you." "You of her," Matthew said. "I suggest you you should cause some mayhem and make sure to take pictures. Matthew, what are you doing? Alvin asked as he approached the two in the living room. Rebecca followed him with Genevieve in her arms. She had Genevieve's diaper bag in hand. Oh, nothing, Matthew said. I may have mentioned to her the other kids could play harmless pranks on Sarita. Don't worry, I didn't suggest anything about burning the house down. Alvin rolled his eyes as he sat down on the sofa. You'd have to build us a new house if that happened, Alvin said. Yeah, about that, Matthew said. I have no experience in building anything, except maybe a gingerbread house. Clementine looked over and noticed that her mother was behind the couch with Genevieve. She must have been changing her diaper, and as Clem got closer, the foul odor made the apparent. She decided to wait until her adoptive mother had finished changing the baby. All right, baby girl, all clean, Rebecca said. She went over to Clementine, who she said, Hi, sweetie, can you hold your baby sister for a minute or two? Clementine nodded as she held out her arms out for Genevieve. The toddler leaned over to Clementine and allowed the girl to hold her. Clementine followed Rebecca, who went to the kitchen to throw away the dirty diaper and to wash her hands. Mommy, Clementine said as she bobbed Genevieve in her arms. Yes, baby, Rebecca said as she finished washing her hands and dried them on the towel. I was wondering if you could do something for Danielle, Clementine said. Rebecca looked over to Clementine with a questioning look. She's really nice, but she also seems hurt. To me, but it's worse. Rebecca went over to Clementine and squatted down to her eye level. She went through a traumatic experience, Rebecca said. I could tell. Clementine nodded and said, Maybe you could talk to her? I've always felt better when you've talked to me. Rebecca sighed and said, Sweetie, it may not be that simple, but I'll try. I do want to help her just like you. She didn't have anyone help her through the trauma she's experienced. Clementine nodded and said, Thank you. You're welcome, Rebecca said. She then frowned before she continued. Have you seen Sarah all day? Has she come home? Yeah, she's got home a few minutes before you and everyone else start showing up got home, Clementine said. Okay, good. I was afraid I would have to send Luca over to find her, Rebecca said. Maybe she's getting better. She seemed to have a normal conversation with me, Gil, and Danielle, Clementine said. Maybe, Rebecca said. She didn't seem too convinced that Sarah was getting better. Anyways, I need to go talk to your daddy and see if he could bring me back dinner. You're not coming? Clementine asked. I can't. I'll be busy trying to talk to Danielle. It won't be easier for her to talk about what happened, Rebecca said. She seemed to know what happened to Danielle and she was hiding it from her daughter. Just help Daddy with Genevieve and I'll stay here with Rebecca and talk her over. Rebecca nodded and she said, Okay. Rebecca nodded before she got up to leave the kitchen. Clementine followed behind her. Rebecca went over to Alvin and she said, I'm going to stay here with Danielle while the rest of you go get something to eat. Why are you staying here? Alvin asked. Did Danielle get in trouble? No, I just need to talk to her about something. In private, Rebecca said. Clem will help you with Genevieve. Okay, babe. I'll ask Jonah and see if I could bring you something to eat, Alvin said. Rebecca nodded and she said thank you. Luke, Danielle, and Sarita walked downstairs. Luke sighed and leaned against the wall. Well, I guess we'll have to convince Jonah to let us take a meal home for Sarah. She won't talk to me. Hell, she won't even look at me, Luke said. Clementine frowned. She'd thought if her friend made progress. Unfortunately, she was wrong. That's too bad, Alvin said. There's something we can do to get her through this. I'm at the end of my rope, Luke said. He sounded frustrated. He must have been upset to see Sarah like this. I know how you feel, Luke. I wish that there was something we can do, but she needs more time, Rebecca said. Luke grumbled in response. I know this is not what you want to hear, but that's where we're at. Sarah knows that she could talk to us, and that we'll be here to help her. Luke sighed and he said, I guess you're right. There was a knock at the door. Luke was the closest to the door and opened it. Hey, I just want to let you know that dinner's ready. Clementine could hear Julie say at the front from the door. Thanks, Julie, Luke said. He stepped away from the door and allowed Randy and Patricia to enter the house. Mom, Dad, Gil said, as he ran over to his parents. He hugged Patricia and who returned a hug. Did you have a fun day? Good day, sweetie? Patricia asked. Yeah, it was fun, Gil said. How was your day? He and Patricia separated from the hug. Boring and tedious, Randy replied. Patricia rolled her eyes in response to Randy's blunt answer. You'll just have to tell us about your day on the way to the factory. Gil nodded and joined his adoptive parents as they went down towards the door. Julia had already left. She probably went to next door to tell Wyatt, Eddie, Rochelle, Rebecca, and Russell that it was time for dinner. "Alright, we better head out before the food's all gone," Luke said. Clementine still had Genevieve in her arms, who seemed to be content. Alvin grabbed the diaper bag and walked over to Rebecca. "I'll be back, babe. I love you," Alvin said as he kissed his wife. Rebecca returned the kiss and said, "I love you too." Alvin walked over to Luke and the others. Clementine noticed that Danielle seemed confused and clung to her rabbit plush toy. She must have been used to eating with Nate at dinner. "Danielle, can you come with me, please?" Rebecca asked. Danielle looked back with a confused look and said, Okay." She walked over to Rebecca. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetie. I just want to talk," Rebecca said. Clementine felt a hand on her shoulder as she looked up to see her adoptive father looking at her. It seemed that everyone was leaving the house to head for the factory. "It's going to be alright, baby. Your mommy can handle this." "Okay," Clementine said. She walked out of the house with Genevieve in her arms. Alvin slowly followed behind her. Unlike last night, the group seemed to be sticking together. Sarah had noticed that the house became quiet. She could hear a couple of voices from downstairs. It didn't seem like the two voices were there to babysit her, which is what she was hoping for. All the time she spent with Julie was wonderful. She was a kind and caring woman who understood the pain that Sarah went through. But she didn't have the right answers. She didn't know how to get rid of the pain that caused so many nightmares. She was forced to relive the deaths of her mother, father, and her boyfriend every time she closed her eyes, and she was sick of it. Sarah pulled out a knife from underneath the pillow, and was somewhat glad that Clementine didn't see the knife that she hid in her pocket in her hooded sweatshirt. Once Clementine, Danielle, and Gil left, she placed the knife under her pillow so no one would see it. Tonight was going to be the last night of her life. She was going to end it. By hurting herself and bleeding out in the bathroom, she got up from the bed and tiptoed towards the bathroom door. Her hand shook as she went to the door before turning the doorknob and went into the hallway. Once she reached the hallway, she made her way to the bathroom. Two of the people within the house was yelling now. It was as if there was an argument between two people. It sounded like a person who was yelling at Danielle. She went towards her bathroom while reassuring herself that everything would be fine. She would have her see her parents and Zeke again. In addition, Clementine had friends and was safe, so she wouldn't be lonely. As for the others like Luke, Rebecca would be alright. Sarah entered the bathroom. No difficulty thanks to the yelling. She went over to the sink and placed a knife against her wrist. She huffed as tears formed in her eyes. She seemed to huff and more as she tried to force herself. Come on, I have to do this," Sarah whispered as tears flowed from her eyes. Surprisingly, memories of Zeke flashed in her mind. "Hi, you're Sarah, right?" It was the first thing he's ever said to her. More memories of the archer who stole her heart flashed through her mind. "I know what you're thinking, you're cute. Nice, fun, and pretty," he said when they started dating. However, the most painful memory were the simple words, "I love you, Sarah." It was like as if he was in the room with her. She opened the tear-filled eyes and looked at herself in the mirror. She was stunned when she saw Zeke standing next to her. "Don't give up," Shearer's voice said. He was when he was teaching her how to shoot a gun. She blinked, the hallucination disappeared. She lowered her hands and fought it over. Zeke never gave up. His life was full of trial. He grew up without a mother, was beaten and abused by his father, watched his little brother die in his arms. He had lost everything, but he never gave up. Sarah wiped the tears from her eyes in the sleeve of her hooded sweatshirt. She wanted to cry, but fought the urge to do so. "I won't give up," she whispered herself as her voice cracked. She could also hear whispering from downstairs, which was accompanied by Sue's voice. Sarah went to the door and left the bathroom with the knife in hand. She then went downstairs and saw Rebecca, holding Danielle in her lap and gently rocked her back and forth. The whimper child yelled a bit in Rebecca's arms. Rebecca looked up to see Sarah and was shocked to see her. Her eyes wandered when she saw a knife. "Sarah, what are you doing with that?" Rebecca asked. She was worried as if Sarah was going to do something drastic. Sarah dropped the knife and said, I was gonna kill myself tonight." Rebecca frowned. "Why would you think that'd be a good idea?" Rebecca asked. Sarah looked down. She could feel Rebecca's disappointed stare on her. "I don't know," Sarah said. She didn't have any answers. There was a long pause between them. Rebecca sighed and said, "Are you all right?" Sarah shook her head and said, "I want the pain to stop." She looked up at Rebecca. She was unsure as to why she was looking at her for an answer. "Sarah, sweetie, I know you want your pain to stop, but it might be a little while till it does. These things take time. You know we're just all here for you. Me, Alvin, Sarita, Luke. You don't have to figure this out on your own. You have us," Rebecca said. Sarah knew this, but for some reason she pushed him away. She should have known better. She should have found comfort in the people she knew best. Sarah looked up to Rebecca and said, "I'm sorry that I pushed you and everyone away." "It's all right, honey," Rebecca said. She made a gesture for her to come and sit by the couch beside her. Sarah obliged and went over to the couch. For once she didn't feel angry or guilty.